Hello and welcome to News 18 Global with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Our top story, the chaos of the Ukraine-Russia war is far from over, ladies and gentlemen. After yesterday's attack on Ukraine by Russian forces, today morning, Moscow woke up to drone strikes. Russia claims that the Kyiv regime was behind the drone strike. The Kremlin has described the strike as a terrorist act. Meanwhile, Ukraine officials have reportedly denied involvement. This attack comes after a similar assault on Kyiv when Russian forces fired a barrage of missiles, leaving at least one person dead. These attacks are the second such drone strikes that have been acknowledged by Russia after the twin drone attack on the Kremlin last month. Joining me on the broadcast is Umit Hazir, Russian analyst and political scientist from Moscow. Thank you, Mr. Hazir, for joining us on CNN News 18. My first question is, given that the conflict has been raging for over a year now, in your opinion, are Russia and Ukraine locked in a war of attrition?
In my opinion, the war will be lasting and it will be not ending soon, because as far as you know that more than a year ago, the war started in the Ukrainian territory, but now the aspect of the war has changed because the war is deepening and the war has moved to territory of Russia. That's why the war is deepening and it will be not ending soon and will be more chaotic and complicated.
Right. Mr. Hazir, with these drone strikes coming in from the Ukrainian side as well as the Russian side, do you think this has changed the dynamic of the conflict where both sides can inflict heavy damages on the other with this advanced technology at their disposal?
Yeah, most probably Russia will be more attacking in other cities of Ukraine, for instance, Kyiv and other cities, because normally the war is right now keeping on in the eastern Ukraine, but probably because of the attacks of Ukraine. On the other hand, by the way, I would like to underline that Ukraine didn't accept, as while Russia is claiming that the attack was Ukraine is behind the attack. On the other hand, Ukraine said that the attack is not happened by Ukraine, but I think that most probably the attack was happened or realized by the Ukrainian side. So from my perspective, I think Ukraine is targeting to move the war to Russian territory, because it is not the first example. Almost 1 month ago, there was an attack to Kremlin by drones, and a few weeks ago, there was also attack in Belgrade city of Russian territory by drones. And now the Ukrainian side is trying to and using effectively drones in order to make some operations inside Russia. And this seems that the aspect and dimensions of the war between Russia and Ukraine changing, and the war will be going on in the larger territory, not only in Ukraine.
Right. So, in your opinion, has Western aid to Ukraine, especially the military aid to Ukraine, been instrumental in changing the dynamics of the war? And given the fact that Western aid has, flooded into Ukraine, especially with military support, what are the miscalculations that Putin has made over the last 1 year?
Yeah, first of all, the United States President Joe Biden today said that the United States will be keeping on in order to support Ukraine, and apparently Western countries will continue to provide military assistance to Ukraine. Therefore, both sides, I mean Russia and Ukraine, would be unable to achieve success or realize their purpose. So the war is right now going on the ground now. Therefore, both sides are attempting, but they cannot achieve their purpose. And Ukraine still use instrumental tools. But as far as I see that Ukraine needs more and more weapons, because both sides, Russia and Ukraine, they lost not only soldiers, and in addition to soldiers, they have lost military equipment. So the war will be also up to help support of Western countries. But now Western countries still continue to support Ukraine, so it will be going on, and from my perspective, most probably the war will be lasting for many years.
Right. And I want to get your take when it comes to Putin's hold of on power in the Kremlin. Do you think the fact that this war has raged on for over 1 year, because at the beginning of the conflict, Putin gave the impression that the Russian war machine would be able to steamroll across Ukraine, but clearly that's not happened. Clearly, Ukraine has put up a tough fight. What kind of pressure is Putin facing back home when it comes to his power dynamics within the Kremlin?
Uh, as a person living in Moscow and talking with Russian people always, I can say that there is no press over Putin, and especially if we consider the Russian society, they do not strongly criticize. Even more than a year, the war is going on. It's like a kind of their normal part of their normal life. They accept the situations, and they pay less attention to the war because it seems like their normal part of normal life, and it seems that the war is happening not in Russia, in far away Russia. But that's why these attacks by drones, it is remarkable. They are remarkable because if these attacks will be going on, will continue in Russian territory, Russian people would be more suffering, and Russian people would be more realizing the war is affecting their life. So it will directly related these attacks.
Right.
But to sum up, it is also I would like to point one important remark.
Mm-hmm.
In the Russian military, there are some groups like Wagner Group and military defense military minister. Sometimes, especially Prigozhin, head of the Wagner Group, have some statements directly and sharply criticizing minister of defense ministry and Russian army. So sometimes there are some media reports and news that claiming that there are some problems inside. But on the other hand, according to your question, still there is no press over Putin. And furthermore, there will be elections in the Russian Federation next year. It will be held in March. So I think that the Russia will be going on under the leadership of Putin. And lastly, now there is no press over Putin.
Right. So there's no pressure over Putin. My final question is that Umid Hazir, that when it comes to the narrative surrounding the war, at first we heard at the beginning of the conflict that it's a Nazi regime that's operating in Kyiv, and to protect the people of Ukraine from this regime is the reason why Putin was pushing the Russian war machine into Ukraine. 1 year on, what are the narratives inside Russia when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine? Because many Russian soldiers are in that war zone. They have families in Ukraine as well, in Russia as well. What are the narratives surrounding the war when it comes to the state media as well as the top politicians of the Kremlin?
Actually, this narrative hasn't changed since the war started. Russia always voiced this claim argument. And interestingly, it has been working over the Russian society. When I talk with Russian people, most of people consider that it's a war against Nazis in Ukraine. And for another thing, now, as far as I see, more than 60%, maybe 70% of the Russian people support the military operation of Russia in Ukraine. That's why the narrative, the official rhetoric of the Russian government has been working, and it is very effective over the Russian society. The Russian society considers that the war is not between only Ukraine and Russia, but also between Western countries and Russia. They consider that the war is against United States, and according to their point of view, Russia is struggling against the United States, and if United States does not support Ukraine, Russia would achieve its purpose.